I'm not aware of these conversations. And she was one of those senior transition officials, and those emails, if they're accurate, that have been publicly released, it certainly appears that was a directly false representation to the Senate.
That's a pretty strong statement from Adam Schiff.
Yeah, and I think it gets to exactly what you were saying, is why is there all this misrepresentation going on? Why would you, when you know you're in peril of being prosecuted if you tell an untruth, why would you do that unless you were covering something up, right? I mean, it's really hard to come up with another explanation. I don't know if there is another explanation why someone would put themselves in that position unless they thought whatever they were going to say that's true is somehow worse.
And the president, David, has said there's nothing wrong about what Flynn did with these conversations with the Russian ambassador. But if that's true, why did Flynn lie about it, and why would KT McFarland at the very least give misleading testimony?
Right. That's the $64,000 question we're all asking, right? This is a la Martha Stewart, right? It's never the underlying issue. It's always, talking to the FBI afterwards and stumbling into something. So that's what we're going to find out here. I think that, you saw Senator Corker, rightfully so, asking for some clarification from KT about her follow-on responses to these QFRs. I think she probably is going to have to answer some more before they move forward. I think we're going to find out all these answers to all those questions you're asking.
And Anna, today the White House was asked if the president was considering a pardon for Flynn. Here's Press Secretary Sarah Sanders.
I haven't asked the president whether or not he would do that.
You have not.
I think before we start discussing the pardons for individuals, we should see, what happens in specific cases too.
So is it fair to say it's on the table?
No, I just said I haven't had the conversation with him because I don't feel that it's necessary until, you get further down the road.
But there have been individuals, including Republican senators who support President Trump, Lindsey Graham, saying don't pardon Michael Flynn. I mean, it's not just people in the media raising this issue, Anna.
Well, look, I think the non-answer is, first of all, probably accurate. I think it is a premature question, but she's answering it the right way because the answer is to be heard by Michael Flynn. Remember, one of the things that Bob Mueller did at the very beginning, as he was starting to amass this legal team, is he went and picked people who were very good at flipping people, at turning people so that they talk and they tell us what they know. I think the White House has got to be very worried about what Flynn may know and what Flynn may say. And the problem with what we're seeing this week is that it's not one isolated case, right? It's Jared Kushner who had to review and edit his clearance forms over and over again. It's Donald Trump Jr. who'd forgotten the meeting with the lawyer and every other person in the Trump campaign. It's KT McFarland, it's Flynn, it's Jeff Sessions. It's one after the other. You've got to either conclude that they are all in a massive lie, or they've all been hit by a 2x4 and are suffering from a concussion.
Jake, just real quick point on to Anna's point about the hand-picked Mueller team, right? Mm-hmm. What's troubling and what this network's covered before, what you've talked about a little bit on this, and which deserves some more time, is the hand-picked FBI agent, right, who was tweeting, was clearly had a bias, right?
Texting,
clearly had an anti-Trump bias, had changed some significant legal wording, and the statement that Comey made was a seminal member of the team that started the investigation of Michael Flynn. I think needs to be a lot more heard about that.
Mueller got rid of immediately upon learning about it.
Senator Grassley needs to hear about it. I think we need to spend
we covered that at length yesterday. Yeah. I want to bring in CNN's Jeff Zeleny right now. And Jeff, you just learned that Pence's office was preparing to possibly be interviewed by the special counsel just in case. Is that getting more inevitable by the day?
Well, Jake, it seems like it is, largely because of what you were all just laying out there. I mean, a Republican who's close to the vice president, he told us that they're certainly preparing for that possibility, largely because everything we have learned. But one, remember, he was the chair of the transition at the time, so that is a key part here. He was overseeing all of the personnel. He called a national security meeting on December 20th, 9 days before these phone calls. The central question here is, we've talked to so many advisors, what did he know, or how did he manage to stay in the dark? He's the savviest politician in that West Wing who was coming in the West Wing. He had experience, of course. Was he intentionally staying out, or was he misled? But those are some of the questions here. Now, Senator Richard Blumenthal on the Senate Judiciary Committee, he says he wants the vice president to come to Capitol Hill and testify about all these new things. So as we learn that there are, at least 7 advisors to the president who knew about this before the vice president, quite simply, how is that possible? So because of all of that, some people close to the vice president believe at some point he will be brought in to answer these questions.
Does he want to? I guess that's the question. I mean, he seems, if President Trump indeed fired Michael Flynn because he had lied to Mike Pence, and Mike Pence feels as though he had a sterling reputation and he was upset that Pence put him in that position. Does he want to speak out more forcefully and try to clear his name? Because, as you note, he was chairman of the transition after they fired Chris Christie, and all these things occurred under his watch. I don't know if he was watching, they were hiding it from him, or what.
I mean, one thing from the beginning, his office and his lawyers have cooperated and said they would cooperate. I think one of the things, 10, 11 months in, that's really astounding about all this is how fine of a line the vice president has walked between maintaining his credibility and not getting sucked into this. Will this change all of that? It certainly could. So I don't know if he wants to come in or not. We do know that he will, of course, if he's asked.
And it's interesting, Kirsten, just because one of the other questions going on right now is whether or not, as John Dowd suggested, the president's lawyer, whether or not the president's legal team is going to argue the president cannot even factually commit obstruction of justice, even if he fired the FBI director James Comey to stop the investigation or to stop the intrusion on Michael Flynn's life, that he's allowed to do that, even though previous articles of impeachment against Clinton and against Nixon have included obstruction of justice. Yeah. Take a listen to then Senator Jeff Sessions during the Clinton years talking specifically about obstruction of justice.
I am concerned about a president under oath being alleged to have committed perjury. I hope that he can rebut that and prove that did not happen. I hope he can show he did not commit obstruction of justice and that he can complete his term. But there are serious allegations that occurred. And in America, and Supreme Court and the American people believe no one is above the law. And the president has gotten himself into this fix that is very serious. I intend to give him an absolutely fair trial.
It is possible that that is just the first time of many, many times that you see that clip.
Well, it's the situational ethics. Everybody changes their view on things as soon as it involves somebody that they like. And so you hear a lot now people saying, well, there was no underlying crime, which is, of course, exactly what the Clinton supporters said during the Clinton impeachment. So,
although Bill Clinton never argued that he was above the law.
Right, but
he argued plenty of other stuff.
It was a common defense, though, of people saying, that there was what he did underlying was not a crime, and so therefore he shouldn't be impeached for it. And so now you hear a lot of the same arguments being made by Trump supporters.
David, let me ask you. So the Wall Street Journal editorial board says that Bob Mueller is too conflicted to lead the Russia probe. You mentioned this former FBI official who's been reassigned because he sent some anti-Trump texts, and I think now he's in the Siberia of the FBI. He's in like human resources or something because they were worried. Bob Mueller was worried about him tainting the case. Obviously, CNN and other outlets have reported on decisions and roles that he played in this investigation and the Clinton investigation. Do you think that in and of itself taints the entire investigation?
Well, I think it definitely taints a portion of the investigation. I think Director Mueller, Bob Mueller is a patriot. Served our country with great distinction for many years. I think he is very sensitive to his reputation and his legacy. I think this tarnishes it, definitely. I think that's why he moved to distance himself quickly. I do think there needs to be a full vetting of this, what exactly this individual touched, how he was involved. It needs to be fleshed out a lot more. Daylight is the best antiseptic. I think, if they were to go to the Hill, Senator Grassie's asked for some of this information already. I think that's put out there. I think Director Mueller, it makes his case a lot more credible if it's distant. And he pushes a lot more space between this individual and his investigation.
And Senator Dianne Feinstein said Judiciary Chairman Senator Chuck Grassley. She's the ranking. She used to be the ranking Democrat. No, she's the ranking Democrat on Judiciary, and Chuck Grassley is the ranking Republican. She said he doesn't want to dig too deeply on the Russia investigation. And Sunday she said she saw the beginning of building a case of obstruction of justice. Usually, the ranking Democrat and the Republican chairman get along pretty well. We've seen that in intelligence committees. We've seen that in the Judiciary Committee in general. That's kind of a harsh thing for Feinstein to say. I'm not saying she's wrong or right, but that's kind of a striking thing for her to say.
They usually get along well, you're right, except when it comes to issues of impeachment. When you see, and look, there's no doubt that in the last 20 years since Bill Clinton, we've become increasingly polarized, increasingly tribal in politics, in our politics, and as a country. And I think you're seeing that play out in the Judiciary Committee, where there's no doubt in my mind that if Democrats were in charge, we'd be in a completely different scenario right now, either in the House or in the Senate. And that's why the 2018 elections are so very important for everybody involved in this.
Absolutely. Everyone stick around. We've got a lot more to talk about. President Trump says Alabama voters should choose Roy Moore over a Democrat because Moore represents, quote, what we stand for in terms of the Trump agenda. So what does the Republican Party actually now stand for? That it's putting money back into Roy Moore's campaign after taking it out. That story. Expect nothing short of fireworks at the rally tonight for Roy Moore. Steve Bannon, Breitbart founder and former White House strategist, is returning to Alabama to throw his support behind the Republican Senate hopeful. And President Trump weighed in again today saying, we don't want to have a liberal Democrat in Alabama. Multiple women, of course, have accused Moore of sexual abuse when they were teens. White House Press Secretary Sarah Sanders there addressing the president's endorsement of Roy Moore, who, among other allegations, have been accused of sexually molesting a 14-year-old, sexually assaulting a 16-year-old, charges he denies. My panel's back with me. Anna, will there be far-reaching implications for the Republican Party if Moore goes on to win?
Look, I think there will not be implications with the Republican base, certainly. I think they've crossed that bridge, but certainly, yes, with everybody else. I think for a lot of women watching this, it is painful to watch, and it is a slap in the face of the victims and standing with the accuser. I think that for young people, this is cringe-inducing. It is also, how can you not be cynical about government? How can you not be cynical about our institutions when you've got the RNC, when you've got people in the Senate denouncing him strongly 3 weeks ago and now going back to him? They look like such hypocrites. Nothing has changed in the Roy Moore case from 3 weeks ago when they lobbed those, they denounced him so strongly. The only thing that has changed is their ability to compromise their principles and their convictions.
And it's not just, of course, the allegations of sexual misconduct with high school girls. He's also been accused of holding some pretty bigoted thoughts. Here he is talking about George Soros, the financier and billionaire and Democrat, who is Jewish, which I bring up because, well, you'll understand when you see the clip.
No matter how much money he's got, he's still going to the same place that people who don't recognize God and morality and accept his salvation are going. And that's not a good place.
And that would probably get a lot more attention if it weren't for all the accusations of molesting teenage girls. But,
yeah, it should get a lot of attention, though. I mean, that's just a despicable thing to say, and I'm a Christian, but I find that completely offensive thing to say. And you asked earlier, is it immoral to vote for somebody like this? It seems like a pretty easy question to answer. Yes, and not just because of the situation with, the allegations about the young women and the girls, children, because of things like this. And he has said many other things that are very bigoted as well. And so, I heard, I think it was Jason Miller last night talking about, well, Republicans are doing this because of how Democrats reacted to Bill Clinton, or look, they're not cleaning their house with Conyers, even though Conyers has since stepped down, and Al Franken. I mean, that's just baloney. There is no way that the Democrats are responsible for how the Republicans are handling this, or if the Democrats had handled it differently, that they would be acting differently. No one above the age of 5 actually makes that argument that Johnny did something and so therefore it's okay for me to do something.
Mitt Romney tweeted, quote, Roy Moore in the U.S. Senate would be a stain on the GOP and on the nation. Lee Korfman, that's the one who says, who accused him of molesting her when she was 14. Lee Korfman and other victims are courageous heroes. No vote, no majority is worth losing our honor, our integrity. David, you're somebody for whom honor and integrity is important, and I know you're not a supporter of Judge Moore. Does it bother you to see this going on?
So here's what I have to say. Everyone's entitled to their presumption, right? And as Anna points out earlier, it is, it's a political decision in a large part, but for the party, it seems, Anna, not a moral decision, as Jim Acosta asked. And you have to ask, the people in Alabama aren't rubes, right? I've been to Alabama. You guys have probably been to Alabama. They're not rubes. They've seen all this information. They've read it in the papers. According to the report earlier, they're sick of it already at this point. They get to try this case when they go to the polls. They get to say whether they believe in Judge Moore or not. This is not a court of law, but they're going to get to cast their votes whether they believe in Judge Moore, they believe the story of the women. I'm not opining one way or the other. It's going to absolutely come down to these folks. And the underlying question is, why would they, I have to believe in the people of Alabama aren't evil people who are out to ruin the republic. Why would they so strongly believe in Judge Moore and go to the polls and support him? I will say one quick thing, that that Doug Jones is a candidate who doesn't necessarily, unlike Ralph Northam, who is a very good candidate for Virginia, Doug Jones is a candidate who is very bad for Alabama. He's, abortion on demand, against Second Amendment. He doesn't fit the state very well. And so I think that there's, the judge is going to win here, I believe, on election night. Because
all policy issues go out the window when, on the other hand, on the other side, your choice is a child molester and a pedophile. To me, it's an astounding tone deafness and dissonance by the Republican Party that in this watershed moment in the United States of America, where we are seeing people in the media, people in the news, people in business lose their jobs and pay huge consequences for sexual harassment, we see Republican leadership, we see the White House, we see the RNC, we see the Republican Party of Alabama supporting this man.
But the party came out against him in the primary. They had an opponent that was...
That's before they knew. That's before they knew he was a sexual harasser. It was for other legitimate reasons.
But my point again is to the thought processes behind the voters, right? There's something underlying this, bigger than Judge Moore and bigger than this race, right? The president came out for Luther Strange. The party came out for Luther Strange. They supported him. He lost pretty badly.
And I think you make a good point, because I wonder when I hear Mitch McConnell, I wonder if some of his backing out has to do with, frankly, I'm not sure Mitch McConnell is not more disliked than Nancy Pelosi.
Can we just talk about this thing that the Republicans do with abortion, okay? The abortion rate is at the lowest rate that it's been in the last 20 years, and that's because of Democrats being in power. And this is what happens every time Democrats... Wait, let me finish. I listened to you. Every time Democrats are in power, the abortion rate drops. And I can explain that sometime if people want to know why. Yes, because they actually provide women with what they need to either avoid the pregnancy or the support that they need to actually have the baby, whether it's health insurance or these kinds of things. So Republicans use this as a way to manipulate voters into voting for somebody who has been credibly accused. I mean, these aren't just accusations. You have to go and look and read them. They're credible accusations from multiple women who talk about things that happened to them when they were girls. So you bring up this abortion thing like it's the answer to the question, and it's just a manipulation.
No, I'm not trying to manipulate anything. I'm trying to explain. I'm trying to figure out. Jake asked the question. I'm trying to say, like, why would voters? They don't identify with Doug Jones. They're not identifying. They don't have to vote
for him because the abortion rate goes down under Democrats. So it's just a bad argument.
I'm trying to figure out why they would vote for Doug. Why would they vote? You're asking a question. Why would after all this is out there, why would they continue to support Judge Moore? Because Doug Jones, in their mind, is not a great candidate. That's the only one of the issues I can think of. Yep. Voters in Alabama identify themselves as pro-gun, pro-life. That's what I'm saying.
Everyone stick around. We've got a lot more to talk about. We have breaking news from the Trump administration. The president is set to deliver a major speech tomorrow that could have a major ripple effect throughout the Middle East. We're going to discuss that next. Stay with us. We're back with some breaking news in our world lead. President Trump is going to deliver a major speech on Israel tomorrow. Sources say that he will announce that the United States will recognize Jerusalem as the capital of Israel and his intention to move the U.S. embassy there, a symbolic and incredibly controversial move that is already sparking outrage among Israel's Arab neighbors. Palestinian groups are calling for 3 days of rage in response, and U.S. allies warn this decision is risking the safety of the American military and diplomats in the region, with Turkey's president calling it a fatal mistake and threatening to cut diplomatic ties with the U.S. I want to bring back my panel to discuss. Before this speech, David, President Trump called 5 world leaders to explain his decision and give them a heads up. Israel, Jordan, the Palestinian Authority, Egypt, and Saudi Arabia. We should disclose that you are being considered for a position, ambassador to Saudi Arabia. There's a lot of concern that this will only inflame tensions, and we're told by the news services in Jordan, Egypt, and Saudi Arabia that they expressed a desire, please don't do this.
Yeah, so Jake, I don't know. I just read it just like you do. There's obviously, I don't know anything beyond what's been reported. I could tell you that having traveled there many times with my former boss, Senator Specter, to Jerusalem, it's a special place to many people. I think that there's, the president's made this promise on the campaign. I will say that if it does become the capital, it'll be the only capital the embassy wasn't located in.
The capital's been in, the embassy rather is Tel Aviv, which is not the capital.
Right, it's not the capital. So it's the only, in the world, it's the only place where we don't have our embassy. And, you could make the argument, perhaps, that by recognizing the legitimacy of the capital there in Israel, that they're not going away, and it might push the parties closer to peace. It's the only thing I can
Such
argue.
an optimist.
Can argue.
You're such
right?
a half glass is half full
Well, I
kind
mean,
of guy.
that's I would say that the U.S. recognizing this as the existence and the existence of Israel, and they're not going away. I mean, I know during the Clinton administration they worked very, very hard. I was there with Senator Specter in the wee hours of the Clinton administration.
Now, I will
and White
tell you
River
that
trying to get wrapped up.
having sat through and lived through so many political speeches by Republican candidates for practically everything from president to dog catcher, I can't tell you the number of them that promised that if they were elected, they would support moving the capital to Jerusalem. So this is kind of like, oh my God, he's actually
means it, right?
He's actually doing what, now be careful what you wish for, because you just may get it. Now,
so Paris,
the region and we are going to have to live with the consequences. But this has been going on as a symbolic promise that then does get forgotten
for decades.
For decades.
Yeah, just in case people don't know, the reason why people oppose it is because East Jerusalem the question is whether or not East Jerusalem will be the status of a future Palestinian state. East Jerusalem taken by Israel during the 1967 war, I believe. And so questions about what will happen to East Jerusalem are always thought of, well, that will be in the peace talks. And if you take Jerusalem out of that, the peace talks, then that's going to really inflame the Palestinian people. So a lot of people have given lip service, as Anna says, but we could say for good reason. I mean, a lot of these Arab leaders say this is going to inflame tensions in the
I guess
region.
you could call it lip service, or you could call it hopeful. Something that hopefully will happen if we can achieve some sort of agreement is another way of looking at it, and precisely because it's seen as taking sides. That's the problem. It's when the U.S. is supposed to look like a fair arbiter of a dispute, like they're not taking sides. I think this looks a little bit like they're taking sides, and so that's a setback in the sense that it can inflame people who don't like this decision, and it could make it more difficult to reach a peace agreement. That said, I mean, reaching peace agreements really hard anyway.
Right.
But I don't think it's going to make it easier. I mean, I don't see how it would make it easier.
I'm sorry, go ahead, Jake.
No, I was just going to say, I mean, Jerusalem is the capital of Israel. I mean, just factually, that's where the Knesset, the parliament is. That's where the president lives, et cetera, the prime minister. But it is something that will make a lot of people angry and might make the situation more difficult.
And it will also make a lot of Jewish Republican donors very happy. This is such a huge symbolic issue, both in Israel and amongst the Jewish community here in the United States, that, it's like, well, let's see what the repercussions are, but we are actually living up to our promise, and I think this was a huge issue for people like Sheldon Adelson. It's been a huge issue for decades for people like the Republican Jewish Congress, the RJC. This is a real issue.
And to Jake, we covered this earlier, and Anna correctly points this out. This president has a long list of things he promised on the campaign, on immigration, on climate, things that may not be popular, but he's going through and checking them off and doing them, right? And this is another one of those things that he's living through, coming through.
Yes, it's the worst of the nightmares. Oh my God, he actually meant the crazy
Everyone
stuff.
stick around. The Supreme Court appears to be sharply divided over a case pitting LGBT rights against the rights of the religious community. Is this justice considered to be the swing vote in the wedding cake case? Is he wavering? We'll continue this conversation next. Stay with us. Welcome back. This just into CNN. We've been discussing the lead up to next week's election to decide the next senator from Alabama. Republican Senator Jeff Flake, an outspoken critic of President Trump, just tweeted this photo. It's a $100 check to the campaign of Doug Jones, the Democrat, running against embattled Republican Roy Moore, accused of improper behavior with high school girls, with the message, country over party. We'll discuss that